What is up,
What's up?
everybody? Good
Hi.
morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. We are on twitch.tv/inside participate, and we're also on Steve Isaac's channel. I can't remember the name of it, Mr. underscore Isaac.
Twitch.tv/Mr._Isaacs. Yeah.
Word. So we're streaming all week. We've been doing them twice a day. It's Friday. Happy Friday, everybody.
Yeah.
I don't know. The only reason I know it's Friday is because someone told me it was Friday. I've lost
Yeah,
track of
I
all
haven't been
sense
paying
of space
attention
and
either.
time.
This is the
So
first time that I thought it was Wednesday.
yeah, exactly. The person you just heard talk, his name is Carson. Carson, what's your last
Hi.
name again?
Stacy,
Stacy.
Stacy. Yep.
Stacy. Carson Stacy was a Steve knows Carson, and Carson's very good at using Gamemaker.
Yeah.
So we're here talking today about another really cool game design tool, game design program, Gamemaker. I love Gamemaker, even though I've never really used it very well. But I'm excited to watch people who actually know what they're doing do it.
Let me jump in there for a second too.
Yeah, set it up.
GameMaker Studio. Before it was even GameMaker Studio, I've been using GameMaker for over 20 years, and I think I remember back to version. I don't know if it was version 4, version 0.4, something crazy, but it was just amazing. And it's the first thing that I came across that was a great tool for teaching kids how to make games. And one of the things I like so much about it is that while there's a drag and drop interface, even the drag and drop interface really models proper coding principles and constructs. So it kind of helps the understanding of computer science, even if you're doing the drag and drop. It's different from block-based coding by far.
Yeah.
And then there is a full programming language behind it. In fact, a student and I that I had in 8th grade ended up writing he was for his passion project. He was learning Gamemaker language, and he and I ended up he wrote a book on Gamemaker language that was published, and I'll find the link and drop it in here because it's pretty cool that, I was, I think, 48 getting my first book published, and this kid was like 14. So it's good stuff, but I am a big fan of Gamemaker.
Yeah, I remember I probably got into it. I was in 1st grade when I was allowed to go to a camp that was teaching it, and it just blew my mind how it worked, because I'd never really done anything like it before, and I had always wanted to. And it was just super powerful getting in there, being like a kid and figuring out that I could actually understand how to do certain things when I was little, and then just being learning it ever since then has been really cool, because it was so easy for somebody to get into. And like you said, it was that was probably 7. I remember when Studio came out, that was probably 6 or 7. It was the logo with the little hammer, the red circle and the hammer. I still remember that. And whenever I see that, I'm like, wow, what a throwback. Because now there's a lot of people use Studio too, and I have it, and it's good. But one is just, and we'll get into why it's so awesome. There's a couple things that make one really, really, really special.
So are you using 1.4 primarily then?
Yeah, I think so. I can check.
Yeah, no, I got to look back because that was.
I think I'm on the list. Whoops, that's not it. I forgot how to do the version check on here.
I started to struggle a little when it moved to 2, unfortunately, because I'm sure for the people who understand the visual scripting type of environment, it's great. But for me, yeah, I go back to 1.4 is sort of my home.
2 is a lot more like a regular engine. It's a lot more like Unreal, how they do their blueprints, or it's a lot like how you make shaders in Unity, and that's not what made it special. It's cool because it's more usable by people who haven't used it before, but it alienated a lot of the people who started with this, which I am one of those people.
I agree.
So I've been sticking to this. Yeah.
Cool. So I should actually probably fire up 1.4. Is that what you're going to be using, or one?
Yeah, I
variation
think so.
Of 1?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, and I can send you this project that I have. Although I'm probably going to go through it so you could copy it quickly.
Okay.
I'll probably make something even simpler than this, just to start out. But I think I'll do it in the same project. So I'm going to go ahead and let me make a new project actually before I go into this one. Just because, I have a dungeon crawler project. Awesome. I didn't think that I did. Cool. I do have a dungeon crawler somewhere. Is it here? No, that's all my new game. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go through at least like the super basics, how different sort of resources work, and how you make them. One of the things I started teaching Gamemaker at the school that I go to last year, and I had no idea. But one of the things that I noticed is the order that these folders are in. If you're in the complex view, there's a way where you can show or hide some of these folders. They might have actually disabled that. I forgot how to do it. But if you have all these folders expanded, so if you have pretty much what I have here, the names of the folders in the order that they show up in is equivalent to all the little icons in this bar right here. So sprites are the
Mhm.
first one, sounds are the second ones, backgrounds are the third. Pass. I didn't realize that until about a couple months ago. So there, it's just like in any other engine, how there's a million different ways to do something. GameMaker is the same way. You could do something sort of clunky that takes a lot of steps and still works, and nobody really notices because the game runs fine. Which was my approach to the first thing that I ever made. So there are all these different resources. Sprites are sort of images that things runs off of. Sounds are sounds. Backgrounds are static images that are behind everything. So you can't really put something behind a background. There is a sort of depth value that decides what goes in front of what. And backgrounds are always the deepest, most furthest back thing. Paths are really cool. You can sort of define like where an object will go. So it's a really cool way to sort of do like fake AI or cutscenes, or if just make something move from one place to another. Scripts are like ways to, they're like functions in actual coding. They're ways to have really complex things happen without having to copy and paste it every single time. So you can make a script for like jumping and then just like write it here and then call your jumping script somewhere else, which is a little hard to wrap your head around if you're totally new. But it makes sense when you do it. And I might try and make a script or two here, even though we're mostly going to be doing drag and drop. Shaders are really cool. I did one for my game that was really crazy, where I made it look like a CRT screen. So the entire game actually bends like you're looking at it on an old TV. And there's like these lines that each sprite gets divided up into, and there's like a light source. It's crazy. You can do some really cool things with those. Fonts are really cool. If you want to draw text to show something, you can do that. We're probably only going to be messing with sprites and objects and rooms today, but everything else is cool. Timelines are crazy. I used them once to make cutscenes, and then didn't. But they're basically a way to make certain things trigger at certain times. So if you want to pull up like a text box or do really complex things, once at very specific times. So if you were making a cutscene and you wanted to say like this character goes here, this object pops up, he picks this thing up and then walks back, and sort of automate that. You do it with timelines. Objects are super important. They're how everything functions. And then rooms are like the actual spaces, where things happen. So to make any of these resources, you just click on the little icon, and they're in between these two lines here. So I'm going to click on this one, and you pull up this window. So making sprites, there's a lot of steps to getting to the edit sprite button. If you're new, a lot of times when I taught kids, they'd get lost. But just keep clicking on whatever pops up. So if you hit edit and then you hit either file new or this little piece of paper here.
That's like really bad advice for your grandparents, though. Right? You
Yeah.
know, the ones that
Yeah.
that then call you the next day and go, "Why is there, casino advertisements coming up on
Oh
my
God. Yeah.
computer?"
um
Don't
yeah, well,
click on whatever comes popping up on your web browser,
on
by
a
the
web,
way.
yeah, but just when you're
Hashtag
making
digital citizenship.
but just when you're making sprites, because sometimes people get lost, and the reason why sometimes it's confusing is because the sprite window is really cool to do animation. So what I just did is I just added one frame by clicking on the little new sprite icon and then hitting OK. But you can make a bunch of frames if you do that. Oh no, you can only make one of that. You can make a bunch of frames this way, and this is already an animation. So like if I went in here and then did like a line, and then I went here and then did like a diagonal line, and then I went here and did like a circle, and I can talk about how to draw stuff in a minute, but this is basically just paint. And then I did show. It's a really terrible but working animation. So you could have a character that like walks around and have him walking, just like you could just do his like walk left as one sprite and then his walk left as another. And it's really cool how you can pretty much integrate animation super seamlessly, without having to do a bunch of trickery like you do in Unity, which is what my team's been struggling with for the past 4 days. Hooray. Um, so I'm just going to make a really basic sort of character here, to show the power of drag and drop. So I'm just going to make like a blue rectangle. That's the opposite of what I wanted to do. So I'm just going to go here. And the sprite editor is really cool because it's like Paint. So a lot of people who have never done any visual work can get right into it. Except I find that it's easier to use in Paint because things sort of snap to pixels. I'm just gonna hit OK, and then I'm gonna call it SPR_player.
I've had kids. I'm sorry. I've had kids get super into using the sprite editor because it is so easy. Yet they all of a sudden realize, wow, I really like making these 8-bit sprites and whatnot. And then oftentimes, and I've talked about this on other streams, that kid that gets super into that becomes like the graphic designer for the team. Yeah, it's weird.
There are some people who just have like a natural ability for that and figuring out where to put the right pixels and how to do shading, and it's just something that's sort of like they already know how to do it without having to learn it. I am not one of those people. But I also like to hit center, which you'll see makes putting it in the room a little confusing. But what this does, most people when they first start out don't understand what this does. This origin thing here. Every frame of the game, it redraws your sprite every single time. So if you think of it like a flip book, it always draws the sprite from the top left first and then out, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but sometimes it is. So if you set this to 0, it draws it from the top left. But if you set it to center, it draws it out from the middle and around, which is good if you're doing things like collisions that need to happen really quickly, or you want to create something from it. So if you say the origin is 0, 0, and then you want to shoot a laser from the sprites X and Y, it'll shoot it from this top left zone. So it'll have to phase through itself, and it'll be really confusing if you go from the left. Then it'll leave the sprite quicker than it will from the right because it's starting from the left. So that's why you do this, because if you want to create anything here, you have to have it centered, because now it's easier to make things that from the sprite, which we're not going to do, but like it's a good practice to center everything. And we have to make an object for it, which is right here. And then the way I sort of like to explain sprites is that it's like a fighting game where you've got the hitboxes over the actual guy. So if you get like a shot of like a fighting game character punching, there's actually a box around their arm that sort of actually deals the damage, but the arm is just kind of for show. And sprites are the same way, where like this is just a little like icon art piece that you use, and the objects are the things that really do things. So I'm gonna click on the object, and then to assign the sprite to the object, you click on this little like drop down menu icon, and then hit the sprite. I'm gonna name it obj_player. And if you're new, you might not think that names are important. I'll pull up my most recent project in a little while to show you that they are, because I think halfway through it, I kind of gave up on names, and it got really confusing. So I went back and named everything. Okay,
so naming convention is huge.
It's really important.
I get into that right away with my students.
Yeah, so Gamemaker, I just do the first 3 or 2 letters of each thing, and then an underscore, and then what it is. I know somebody who's working on software for really huge studios with like 250 people to name all of their, because he was working on a project. He came from art, just doing like visual art and paintings and stuff, and he started working at a couple different really big studios, working on some shooters and stuff. He worked with Kojima and on Lego Star Wars and some crazy things. And he got really annoyed that nobody would agree on what to name things, and that programmers would be trying to call his art, and that he would capitalize something or not like nobody could agree on something. So he just decided to quit, and now he's making software that names and organizes, hundreds of thousands. Like think about how many models like a Call of Duty game has. Like he's organizing all of them seamlessly so that a programmer can just call it and talk about the name of it, or a 3D or a level designer can place it somewhere, and an artist just has to drag it into one folder instead of like the menagerie that modern day AAA studios are. So if you start doing stuff like this, it gets you into that habit where like you'll be able to use software that this guy's working on because it gets really complicated. So start with this. Don't do a bunch of numbers because at first you think that you can keep track of it all, and then you can't. So this is why Gamemaker is so cool right here. Is this events and actions view? This is what made it easy for me to understand as a kid, and this blows my mind now because I know that everything that I know now came from this view right here. I'm working on a game right now. I don't want to say a ton about it because there's publishing people behind it, but we just started working on our AI for it. And our modeler made a model for one of our AI agents before we actually ever programmed the AI for him. And he's this knight who's got this helmet with these horns, and he's got this giant battle axe behind him, and it's got this weight to it. And we were like, well, we have to make an AI agent that actually fits how he looks. Like we can't just have him zipping around the map at 100 miles an hour and like distancing himself properly. So we thought that would be really complicated and take us a ton of time. And I just thought, let's just break it down into events and actions, just how Gamemaker does it, and think like, okay, so our event is if he drops down to a certain amount of health, he throws his battle axe and runs to pick it up, or if the player gets within a certain distance, he'll charge, or if you get too far back, he'll do something, and all these different things. And we broke it up into events and actions, just how Gamemaker was, and got him working and in and implemented in like 2 days. So it's super, super important to think about things, how this works, and you'll understand how it works the more and more that you use it, which is really cool. So events are basically things that the player does or that happen without there being anything before them. So it's like an action reaction thing, kind of like in physics, how like something has to happen, like an action has to happen before there's a reaction, which sounds really weird, but that's what events are. So these are all sort of things that happen without there being any input. So like you can't decide when a frame happens, which is what step is. You can't decide when things are created. These are just sort of like built-in functions. So I'm gonna use the key press ones, and I'm gonna say up. So that's when you press the up key, and that's the event. And the action that I'm going to use is literally the very first one. It's this move fix over here. And then when I was really little, I used to use the horizontal speed, which would make it move in a direction, but just not the right one. But move fix is the one that you want to use. And I'm just going to say up, and I'm going to say 3. And this is super cool because this is visual, but this isn't block-based like Scratch or something. This is way cooler than that because you can see that we're going to move up, we're going to move with 3, and it's when we press the up key. And I'll left-click it and then duplicate it and go to key press down. And I'll double-click this and change that. And if I'm going too fast, let me know. But I'm just going through and duplicating all these and then changing which way they go. So I'll do that. Oops.
Also, this recording will be available after. So if you want to go a little slower on your own, you can at least, like if Carson moves faster now, he can get more accomplished, but then you can go back and
you can go back. I mean, most people most people pick up on what to do there pretty quickly because you can also just go to the add event again and do key press and that. And I'm just going to already put this in a room. So if you hit OK, and then to make a room, you click the button next to the object. These are the two that you're probably going to end up using the most. And then in the rooms, you go to this objects tab here, and you go here and put your player in, and then hit the check mark. You use this little green arrow up here to do a test build, and you're already going to have some sort of like Zelda type top-down movement. And there you go. Which like is really simple right now. There's actually one thing that I have to do real quick. If you go to your room, this is really important. Set the speed here to 60. That should always be 60 because it's basically, it's not exactly frames per second, but it's pretty much frames per second. Make it 60, your games will run way better. But we pretty much have like some sort of like Zelda type movement here. And there's already a ton of potential for it. When I was teaching at the high school that I go to, we did a platformer controller that was just like a super simple platform character. And there was a kid who accidentally put 2 in the same room, and he made an entire game where you had to get the two characters controlled with the exact same control, so both of them would move left, both of them would move right, but you had to get them to touch each other. So it was just fascinating because they would move like in the same direction. So you would have to have like one get stuck on a wall while the other one came to meet it. Or he had one where, and then like I thought it was kind of interesting because like you'd have to walk one into a wall, have it keep walking into a wall while the other one caught up to it. Because they would just keep walking right until the second one got it. And then he had one where it was vertical, so that on the top there was a row of spikes, and then on the bottom there was like a sort of circular maze that it had to get out of. So you had to move. So you basically had to move up, right, for it to jump into the first part of the circle. But then the guy by the spikes also had to move at the right amount so that he didn't fall into a spike. And he just took one platform character and some spikes and made this like mind-boggling thing. And I told him to sell it right then and there because it was just genius. And so you can do some really, really cool stuff. And I've seen people do really, really cool stuff with just like super basic movement like this. So that's pretty much the really basic drag and drop functionality there. I'll do some. I'll make a new sprite just for the heck of it. And I'll make a, because this is just what I do when I teach high schoolers. And high schoolers are totally, totally new. And I'll go here and I'll make a yellow line, and I'll do that. That's gonna be backwards, yeah. Can I reverse these somehow? Yeah. And so this is actually really cool for visual stuff. If you use your right mouse, it'll change this color, and your left mouse, it'll change this color. And then when you go to do like a 2-color shape, it'll fill it with something else. So that's kind of neat. So I'm just going to do a little coin here. So I'm going to try this using the drag and drop variables. And hopefully it'll work. So if you're going to really keep track of anything, normally you would use code. Actually, no, I am going to use code, but I'm going to do it in a really neat way. So I'm going to make a create event, which is basically when the object gets created. It only happens once. So if you have an object have a create event and you think that like it's going to run every frame, that's not how it works. It's just when it first gets spawned into the game. And I think every room that it gets created into. I should know if it happens in every room or not, but I don't. In your control tab over here, so you have main 1, main 2, main 3, control, score, draw, all that. I'm going to use this execute code function here. I'm going to get into that really quickly. There are also these variable ones that I might, yeah, I'm actually going to try the variable ones. So I'm going to drag in this sort of square that says var here. And I'm going to say coins, and I'm going to set it to 0. So this is the same thing as making a variable in code called coins and setting it to 0. I never really use these, but in keeping everything in drag and drop, I'm going to try to.
Hey,
so we'll
Carson,
see.
Carson, we have a really good question in chat.
Yep.
Wondering how young you think this kind of thing can be introduced. How young do you think kids are that are using this? If you have any kind of anecdotal idea.
Yeah.
And so I have an 11-year-old, for example, and
Okay.
I feel like there might be material that you could kind of ease them into at 11 years old that could figure out how to do this.
I started. Yeah. You can. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, so I'm just curious, and Chad is curious. How old do you think is a good age to start learning this?
I started when I was 7. So that I think is a little early because it didn't really click for me. Like I started when I was 7, and I think it clicked when I was like 11 was when I actually understood how things worked. But I started that young, and I went to like a day camp that was completely ahead of its time because now they're out of business. But like the guy had like he saw that this could be really huge, and now he does other games and education stuff. I looked him up recently; he's doing well. But I was 7, and I was the youngest kid there by like 5 years, and I I think that a kid like I think pretty much like 8 and up is good, but you should try and start as early as possible. Because the earlier you start, the earlier it'll click. And I don't really know how to describe it, but like I remember like really sort of specific moments when like everything makes sense. Like you get really confused by it at first. And if you're little when that happens, like I was 11 when I first figured out sort of what I like, why the things that I was doing worked. And I had that moment when I was 11 at first, and that was super powerful because when I was like 15 and started making Team Fortress maps, I had that same moment
Hmm.
in Hammer. So I would say as early as possible. If it's too early, like it's fine. Um, like if you're like 7, if you have like a 7 or 8 year old, and then you try it with them and they don't get it, and then you just want to wait a little bit longer, that's totally cool. But it's always worth just trying it and seeing what happens, especially if they love games, because like it was all I
Yeah.
ever wanted to do before I ever got my hands on it. So even though I didn't understand it and I was just kind of like clicking things and seeing what they did, that was still I loved it. Even though I had no idea what I was doing. So you can kind of start as early as possible, and if you're really into it, you'll know. Because even not doing anything of meaning will still be really fun.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm gonna throw in one of my favorite expressions again: low floor, high ceiling. You know, like
yeah,
Carson said with the drag and drop part, and what he was just showing you with getting a character in the game, moving around, keeping it kind of basic. You know, that is something that the younger kids could do. But
yeah,
then the potential for this, it's another one of those where when you get into the programming side of it, or even the more sophisticated drag and drop, I mean, you know, the sky's the limit. So I love products like this where the motivation comes from, like Carson was saying, the kid who loves games and wants to make games and starts doing something and then realizes what they want to do. That's the most pure form of motivation to
yeah.
learn that I've ever seen.
Yeah, because I just remember like getting into this and like thinking like I would go through and just look at all these different icons and be like, what do these even do? It's just super powerful. Like if you're into it, or if you have a kid who's into it and really wants to try it, there's really if it's too early, um, you'll know. But I don't think that a too early for this really exists. Because even just doing something super simple and stupid is like super, super powerful. Which is what I'm gonna try and get across today. And this is a little like with variables and stuff. Sometimes just moving is really cool. I'm gonna do variables just because I have something to do. So I'm gonna say coins is equal to 0, and I'm going to uh, then say on collision with the coin, dragging the same thing, and we'll say coins and then plus equals 1. And then you just say plus equals because equals would set it to only 1, and plus 1 doesn't actually work. So you just say plus equals 1. And I'm also going to make a wall. Um, because that's where like I remember when I was a kid and I made a wall, coins, and some ghosts. I was just like I felt like I was taught how. Like I just was so excited to just to get that working, and I made so many stupid little like maze games and stuff. That just like they and it was cool because like looking back on it, um, it was like I don't think I understood the value of it at the time, but now like that was so foundational and important for me to have. Like if I didn't do that, there's no way that I'd be working on what I'm working on now and like doing stuff for Champlain and like making a project like I'm working on a first person shooter where you play as a mage and the magic spells are procedural. So like some of them bounce off walls, some of them go through things, like they're all different. It's super dynamic and crazy, and I there's no way that I'd be able to do that if I didn't start with this, which is really cool how it's sort of built up over the years. So the important thing with the wall is to check this little solid checkbox here. Um, I'm not entirely sure how solid works. GameMaker has a lot of really sort of quirky things that it just kind of does, and I don't really know why. Solid sets some sort of flag in the object's actual properties that, and it makes it behave differently with all of the functions than if it were not solid. Um, So that's that. So just make sure that you have solid check for anything that you don't want to move. And then I'm going to say add event on collision, which is basically just when two things sort of meet. And there are ways to do collisions better than this, but you don't have to worry about that. I'm going to drag in the move thing again that we did before the move fixed and just say, I'm just going to click the one in the middle and say speed is 0 because we want to stop moving. Okay. And so now if you go back to your room, double click, you can click and drag these walls around. And this is when it starts getting like you can just make really simple things. Like you could basically just make a maze at this point. And without really having to do any like programming. And like I remember when I was like first starting when I was 7, 8 years old, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna make like I just want to build stuff to go through and walk around in. And that was just what I did, even though there was no game. Like just being like, let's say you can go up here and then maybe you walk around here. And I would try to sort of recreate levels from stuff that I was playing. So like I would play like God, what would it have been? Like early like I guess like Metroid Other M was like the first thing that I ever played through start to finish. And so I tried to make like Other M levels or stuff like that. And Tekken 7's single player mode. Just games that had levels that I could try and recreate in sort of this top down view. And now we should be able to just collide with walls and they'll stop moving. What is this one? It doesn't like the plus equals 1. Can I just say +1 then? I just changed the plus equals to +1 because I don't think it likes saying the plus equals. Okay, cool. In code, you have to say plus equals, but I guess you don't there. Yeah, so now we collide with walls. Once again, for whatever reason, going side to side is different than going up and down. I'm not entirely sure why. Some kids in the class that I teach got it to be all 4 ways go totally flush with the wall. I'm not sure why, but like already, like again, when I was a kid and I made this, I was like, this is just so cool.
I heard a remake of Berserk, right? In what you're making here, like
yeah, exactly. Like it takes like nothing to turn this into a Zelda clone. Like we could even do that. Just like adding it. Actually, let's do that. We'll do one. I had a Donkey Kong clone set up. We'll do one that's like kind of Zelda or Berserker-ish, and then one that is Donkey Kong, because the Donkey Kong one's just a little bit more code based, but this one I'll try and stick to almost completely drag and drop. So the next thing that I want to do is get the number of coins to show up. I'm trying to think if there's a way to do this without doing code. You could use these built-in things here, but are they any good? Does this say draw score? Yeah. All right, let's try that. So I'm going to change my variable name from coins to score. And I'm only going back and changing this. So I'm trying to make this stick to all drag and drop. And I've like never been this exclusive with it for a long time. So I'm going to add a new draw event. And draw is kind of hard to understand if you've never done anything like this before. If you think of games as a flip book, games are a little bit more than a flip book because, or even any sort of like computer, no, just games actually, even movies, or any sort of like 3D animation or 2D animation, they're all different than games because those you're setting the next frame way in advance before it actually ever plays through. So like Toy Story like doesn't change frame by frame, like it's always the same thing. But games have this weird challenge of like every single frame things are different. And that's like there's no other medium that's like that. So basically every single frame, not only things are different, but they're also drawing. So it's like a flip book if you had to draw every single page when you flip to a new page. And so the draw event is when this particular object gets drawn, the things that happen. And I'm actually going to change this to draw GUI. I realize as I talk through it. And draw GUI is drawing a user interface above that. So we don't want to use draw, we want to use draw GUI. That was my mistake. Draw score. Okay, so I'm going to drag in the third thing in the score tab here. And I'm going to say X is 32 and Y is 0. So that should be the top left. And I don't know. Let's see if this works. This might not, but we'll try. I don't. I've never done anything with full drag and drop. Hey, look at that. Score shows up. Cool. So now if we put some coins in our level, we should be able to have some coins. And I mean, like if you added like a little like sound effect to this, like if you got like BFXR and just made a little coin sound that's like, I don't know how much time have we spent doing this, like 30 minutes, and we already have this. Okay, so why is that not working? Let's take a look. Collision with coins, set score to 1. At least if it's not gonna add it. That's really weird that that's not working. I'm sure there's a really simple. I'm gonna drag in the destroy, which is in the main 1 tab, and it's this little recycling bin thing. And I'm gonna delete this.
You know what? There's also like one of the interesting things about the variables in GameMaker with drag and drop is there is a built-in score variable. So
that's what I'm trying to use here.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think you need to use. I think you can go to with collision. You're having it as set variable. I don't think you need to do it as variable.
It's not a set. What do I do?
In other words, wait, delete that for a minute. Go to now. I got to remember.
I have draw, test, and set here.
I think there's actually set. Like there's a score variable. Where the heck is it?
Oh yeah. Okay, no. Yeah, I got you. Yeah. Okay. I know which one you're talking about. I have to find it.
It's underscore. Like when you go into the board, when you add event,
Here we go. So new score. So that's set. So can I add it?
Yeah, set would be 0, and then
no, it's just set, test, and draw again. Oh, but you know what? I know why. It's because I'm using the variable, and I should be using the score thing here.
Exactly.
So I'm going to change that to this set score here. Okay, so I'm going to say set score is 0, and that's instead of using
right
these from here, you're using these. Okay, cool. And I have to do that because it's going to draw that. Okay, cool. So now I want to set it to +1. And I'll do that before we destroy. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Yeah, so that's an interesting point, bringing in the built-in things. So GameMaker has built-in score, which is going to work exactly how we think it is, where you just go and pick something up. That's not how we think it works. Oh, okay. So I'm going to change this. I'm going to go into our coins. So I'm going to delete the collision with coin thing here. I'm fumbling with some of these because I haven't done this in forever. We're going to say collision with player, and then we'll paste in what we had, which is set score plus equals 1 and destroy. So the reason why you would use the built-in score instead of the making a variable for it is because the score is global, which means that any object that you make can access it.
Right.
But if it weren't global, our coin, we'd be adding score in the coin, and it wouldn't know what that is because that's created in the player.
Yeah, I think GameMaker also did that in a way to be like, hey, most people who make a game are going to want to use these built-in variables like score, lives, and health. So rather than making them create those as new variables, let's give those to them. And then other variables, you could obviously create any variable you want to do anything you want.
Yeah, I've never used these in a real project. Usually because they're kind of hard to change in ways that you would want to change them only. But if you're doing something like this where you're trying to use exclusively drag and drop, it's perfect. Yeah, and then the thing is too, like if I had done the regular variable and then made a variable in here and the coin doesn't know what to do, it's confusing and frustrating when you're like a little kid. But then all of a sudden you're in college making things with variable scope and you have to understand how scope works. And all of a sudden you learned that when you were 7. So what variable scope is, like literally visually, is that because like some people like variable scope is something that like CS professors can teach an entire class on. Like that's basically a college computer science class. But in GameMaker, for variable scope, all you have to say is this box doesn't talk to this box. Like this box, if you say something in this box, it might not know what happens in this box. But sometimes if you use the score thing, this is the same as this. But these boxes sometimes talk to each other and sometimes they don't. And that's a variable scope college class right there. Which is just so cool that you learn those principles when you're little. And now it'll work. Yeah, okay, cool. This is what we were going for. Oh, it's just setting it to 1. It's not.
Well, yeah, so that's where I think it was, each time it was setting it to 1. But
2 plus 1. Oh, relative. You have to check for
Yep, relative.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, so check the little relative box because that means that it can change. Now it should work.
Yep.
And what's cool too is like making little changes like that takes like 30 seconds, where like sometimes you have to rewrite a script to be able to do it, and now it works how we want it to. Perfect.
And also with that, I mean, it's such a great example of like exactly what we're doing right now is, you know, the beauty of live coding, of like saying, okay, so, you know, we set this up now. Oh wait, that didn't work. Well, what's going on? And to live through that and go through that is really valuable.
Yeah.
So
and it's such a visual way too to be able to see it. So all I did was I made a score variable using these. So I dragged and set score. I set it to 0 when we first got created. I'm drawing it with the one with the little green box. And then in the coin collision event, it does that. So now I'm going to make a door. And this is where it gets really cool when you're a kid, because you could spend hours just doing this and nothing else and having a blast. And I used to do this all the time, make these huge mazes. I'm going to make a new sprite, and I'm just going to make a little box, and we'll change it up, and we'll say that our width will be 64. And I'm just going to make a green box with a... I think I have to set my left color to this and my right color to that. I might have gotten it backwards, but we'll see. You know, let's see how this works. And the reason why I'm fumbling with the colors is because when you use these shape tools down here, one of them makes it transparent, one of them makes it an outline with whatever your second color is, and then one of them makes it a solid color. I figured that out months ago. Like when I was teaching is when I learned that those functions ever exist. So, and you know, which is crazy because like, I don't know, almost 7 years later, I can come back to something that I used literally since I was a child and still learn new things. And it blows my mind how many things I don't know or haven't figured out, or how I can still be 18 and in college for game development and struggling to make a sprite fit in this freaking box. Still nope. I'm really just about to just fill it with the color. There we go. Perfect. That took me, I got on the first try. I'm going to name this SPR_door. And center it, hit OK, and I'm going to make a new object. And so one of the things that I'm going to do, which once again, if you're new, you don't really understand the value of, is I'm going to make a folder just by left clicking in here and saying insert group. And I'm going to make a group and call it doors. And so this is where this gets really cool. How do I want to do this? All right, let's just do it the way that you would do it if you were a child. So I'm going to say add event on collision with doors door. And I'm going to go to the main 1 tab. And down here, there are different room functions here. And I'm going to say different room. Whoops, that's not different. Different room, which is this one. And I'm going to say room. We'll make a new room, and then we'll change that. So let me just duplicate this room and change some things around so that we can see that it's not the same one. Maybe it looks like that. And no. And we'll put this door over here. Put it right there. No. Oh, and then I forgot to center the walls too, which is why they're lining up imperfectly. Cool. So we're going to go to room 0. Oh, we want to change this to room 1. And I think you might be able to see where this is going, because when I was a kid, this was just like my favorite thing. I mean, I would spend hours just making doors that would go to different rooms.
Yep.
So I don't know why. Oh, because I changed where my walls are being drawn from, and so now they're all wacky. But now it takes you to a different room, and that's really cool because I'm gonna uncenter my walls actually and just set this back to 0, 0 because I want to keep my rooms looking okay without having to remake them.
It's funny that we've been streaming for 40 minutes, or at least you've been doing this for 40 minutes,
Yeah.
and I mean, we made a game.
This
Yeah.
is basically Zelda. Like, like that was so cool because I would just and it's really cool to like just rapidly come up with things. I know at Champlain they use Gamemaker for prototyping things really easily. So like I have a handheld laptop called the GPD Win. It's really cool. It's this little thing that you could buy on Amazon, and it's a full Windows laptop that fits in your pocket. It's awesome. And
Yeah.
when I was at Champlain, I did a summer program there, and I had this idea for our final project to be a drag racing game where you mashed on the A button or super quick to power up your engine, and then you would get off the line, and whoever had mashed harder and had more power, like from their buildup, would go further. And my friends didn't really get it because like describing it was hard. So I'm sitting there at lunch telling them about it, and I took out the little pocket laptop and I made a prototype for it in like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I just made a little power variable, and press the button and it plus equals 1, and then there's a timer and it hits down and they both go forward. And I showed it to them like then and there, and I made it in GameMaker, and it literally took me like I was in the middle of describing it, I was working on it, and it took me like 10 minutes. It's crazy how much you can do in how little time.
One of the other One of the cool things about the way that you're showing this too, which I love, and I get into this with my students, is you start with like the basic mechanics. So I love having kids start with their sprite being a square, because the reality is the gameplay and the mechanics is the important part. The minute they decide to put Link in there as a character, now their game looks beautiful. But
now it is Zelda.
Now it is Zelda. But the thing that's also cool about what you're showing is the mechanics are all in place. So now we have the character moving, we have the coin mechanism, and we have the door. And we have the walls.
Yeah.
The minute a kid now goes in and adds room after room after room, making a 10-level game with increased difficulty and just moving things around becomes, like you say, like so easy. So it's like, take the upfront investment time in the base mechanics and get something functional working, and you're golden. I had a kid that in 6th grade, when he started my game club, my game design club years ago, he started to create a game called Ball. And the character was a ball, and the mechanics were, and it ended up becoming, over the 3 years that he was with me, he just kept building levels and levels, and it became a cult hit in our school. People started finding it on our shared drive, and you'd see people playing it that you wouldn't have knew that it existed.
Yeah.
And it was so simple yet so involved because it just kept going. And it was like, what is it, the Impossible game, or one of those where every level is almost the same, but then mechanics change and this and that. So it's just amazing when you get into that groove of like, wow, now that I have this level, I just want to change one little thing, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's remarkable.
It's crazy, and what's really cool is that that's mirrored in the stuff that I'm doing now. So on this insane wizard project that I'm working on with kids who like have computer science degrees in college, and we're pitching it to these like huge publishers and stuff. Our whole mantra is minimal effort, maximum content. So the idea is that we sit down and we spend 15 minutes working on something, and it's in and it works, and we move on to the next thing, because there's 5 of us making something that's going to be probably 6 or 7 hours in length, and we don't want to spend 6 days working on one enemy. It's like we have to have as many things in there as possible. They all still need to be good, but we're not making garbage and putting it in, but we can't make stuff that takes us a ton of time. And it goes back to this, like, this is minimum effort. I mean, it's been 20 minutes or 30 minutes, 40 minutes, however long it's been, and I've made 2 doors, and that's maximum product, because now you can make a gigantic maze.
Totally.
So I'm like, if I just duplicate this event, and I say door 2, and then I make this go to a different room. Now you have a maze.
You could duplicate the rooms and then just change the placement.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm just dragging this and going here. And you're supposed to, for naming conventions, you do RM _ then the room. So I'll just call this 3. And then I'll like put this here. I just want to be able to see that they're different.
Yeah, exactly.
And so let's see here. So now I want to take door 2. Whoops. And what's cool too, again, about like fundamentals of like design and stuff is like when I was a kid, like this taught me like sort of the persistence of like how spaces work. So I was like, okay, so if you go through this door, um, you should go back the same way that you
Yep.
came from, which I can sort of do because yeah, okay, so I can put that way. Which is really cool because like when you're a kid, like you're trying to make a space that makes sense, but then also in actual level design, that's really important because when you're working with super complex like 3D spaces, it has to feel like it's a real space. So that doesn't take me back to where I came from, but it can. That's popping me around because I don't have new rooms. But and also your door objects are completely empty. They're just for the player. Let me drag this here. And okay, how much time do we have? Because there's one more thing that I think I want to do.
Yeah, we have about 9 minutes.
Okay, cool. So I also want to do I'll do this. Let's make a new object. Let's make a new key. So now I'm gonna make a key, and this is where it gets really cool. Because like this is like level design fundamentals. Like I remember when I was in 5th grade, I think I started making Team Fortress maps, and one of the things that people really liked about my Team Fortress maps is that um, they were really complex. Like there was a lot to them, but people could sort of figure out where to go and how they worked in a couple of minutes. Like they would play it and they would walk through it once and be like, okay, cool. I can see this guy from here. If I go here, I go here. And like the spaces just kind of made sense and sort of like they'd flow into each other really well. And that sort of became my thing. And what's cool about that is that I learned that here, making doors go to the same place that they came from. So if I say object key, we'll do this real quick. Let's say now we have to use a built-in variable. So let's go here. Where is here? Here is this tab here. And we'll say we'll do both capitalized because that's how people do it now. We'll say has keys is equal to 0. And then we'll say on collision with the key, has keys is equal to 1. And then on the collision with the door, we'll say, okay, so this is really cool. So this is super simple. If you drag in these arrows here, what these basically do is these make this a block that runs when something happens. So it's the same thing in actual code if you add curly brackets around the outside. So I'm going to go ahead and drag in this variable, this sort of test variable thing, which is an if statement in actual code. So I'm going to say if has keys is equal to 1. So if we have a key, go to the next room is pretty much what that says. And I'll put the key in the room. And then in the key, I also want to say in the key, I want to have it get destroyed when the player picks it up.
That's so funny. Like I always use the variable has key. So
Yep.
if has key equals 0, but if has key equals 1, then we're good.
Yep. And then destroy itself. Yep. Cool. Awesome. So now we can go right, like, and then we go here, and then it moves us.
Yeah.
I go back.
There it is.
Yep.
That's awesome, and I think that's a great place to at least stop the instructional part. But what I would love is, do you have easy enough access to Zong to show our good people here?
Yep. I was just about to do that. So when you do something crazy, I think this is the latest build of it. Nope. I think this is the latest build of it. Okay, this is at least a build that I can pull up. This is the game that I'm working on right now, which gets a little nuts. One of the things I'm doing is audio that is dynamic and changes, so I have a ton of sound. These are all my scripts. So I can, but like my actual drag and drop is actually pretty simple.
Mm.
Let me make this a little bit smaller. So I talked about scripts before and how scripts are basically like containers for things. Every single action in this game uh, comes from scripts. So I have these alarms that are timers that basically change the states of the player. So if like they get hit with a laser and they get stunned, an alarm will start counting, and then I guess this is what happens once the laser gun charge gets hit. This is kind of complicated. This is changing what scripts run based on what state they're in. So they have sort of different. So basic is like when the player's just walking around. It's a sports game, so ball carriers when they're carrying the ball. And then I have all these different scripts here that change what they are. And then you'll notice that I named them all, which is really important because like I had to. And then I have different ones for player 1 and player 2 because I didn't want to spend the time on making a base class because I
hit play.
Yeah, okay. Let me do that. Do I have a controller?
Oops.
You need a controller. Let me see if I can find a controller because I need one. I might just be able to at least explain it without having a controller. So this is what it looks like. So it's this. Oh, okay. I can at least play it a little bit. So usually you use a controller to sort of aim where you're throwing the ball. And the goals are not being animated for some reason. But you basically run around and you put the ball in the goal, and it'll crash because there's not a controller plugged in.
Okay.
But yeah, so
it's a hyper frenetic.
Yeah, you can kind of see what it's like, but it's very physicsy and very very fast when two people are playing it and they have controllers plugged in. But the cool thing about it is that I made the throwing and catching system in like a day because I remember I was trying to recreate a mechanic from Mario Baseball, which is when you hit the ball, the sound rises and then it falls after it hit its arc. And I realized that the sort of mechanism that I made to throw the ball was really awesome and super fun and kind of interesting. And so I was like, I'll just make an entire game around this. And I made the throwing and catching in a day and then just spent all this other time making sure that it felt perfect.
The game is so fun.
Yeah, people love it.
Carson showcased, and I mean, I saw people like hordes of people waiting to play, each other, and look at, I mean, that audience. Did you see the audience in there? The spectators in the stands. They were. I
did the crowd with the stadium. There were kids. I have one video of a kid that I got from Kids Comic Con in it. He was in like a Naruto costume and he's jumping up and down like, to throw his controller. I was kind of worried that he was gonna break something because he was so into it. There were people who sat there for hours just throwing the ball around, and it's cool because like you explain it to people and it sort of clicks. Like when they realize that they can jump and throw the ball at the same time, they're like, oh, okay, this is how this works. And like I brought it to play crafting, and it's really interesting to see people. Like the game that I made before this was a fighting game, and it was interesting because it was really simple, and there was like novelty, and that people would see it, they'd think it's cool, they'd play it, and then they'd walk away, and it was like, okay, cool. But with this, there are some people who get really, really, really good at it. So they'll do like fake throws, or they can like bounce it off the wall and score and do all sorts of crazy things.
This could be an esport.
Yeah, and it's super crazy to see people get good at something that I've made. Like I've had people who've beat me, and it's just like, and whenever I lose, I'm super happy because I'm like, somebody put the time in to learn how to get really good at this. And awesome. If I had a controller, I'm looking around. Yeah. I don't think that I can see one that I can plug in. They're all downstairs right now. But this is what an actual project looks like. There's somebody else that was in a game design group that I was in that made something in Gamemaker, and it was basically a top-down shooter that was on a radar screen, and the radar, like the spinny thing on the radar, would reveal the enemies. And he did it in Gamemaker, and it was just like he had a ship follow a mouse, and you clicked and it would shoot, and then things get created when the line touches them. And it's like super simple to do things, but really awesome and powerful.
There are some top-notch games out there that have been published that are made completely in Gamemaker. So it's definitely a very viable professional development tool.
Yeah, a lot of people. It's funny because a lot of people don't think that, but also all of those people love Undertale. So it's like your favorite game's made in it, but you're making like I mean, there's so many great things.
So So Undertale was made in GameMaker. That's probably the best example.
Yeah, Undertale on all the games made by Vlambeer, which is a really awesome studio out of Norway, I think. Rami Ismail and Jan Will, I can't pronounce his last name, but somebody who's very cool. And they make all these they made like Nuclear Throne and Ridiculous Fishing and a lot of games that feel really good. Like they really focus hard on like doing one thing that's awesome. So like they have a game called Lufraz where you fly around in a little plane and you shoot other planes down, but like shooting another plane down, just the screen shakes and there's an explosion and like it feels awesome. And they really focus on feedback. There's a talk that I can send you of the second member of it, called The Art of Screen Shake, where he basically stands there and he has a Gamemaker game that he made, and it's a super simple like platformer where you shoot zombies. And he adds 50 different things to it that turn it into like an okay thing into just this mind-blowing, like, I would spend $20 on that if like, let me spend $20 on that. And it's super simple. And he does these 50 things that all take like 5 seconds to do on their own. He's like, just add a little sprite whenever you shoot something, just make a little circle. And then, so it has like, looks like it's sort of like a light flash, and then make the zombies like explode instead of just destroying them. And then maybe add an animation on the player or do little particle effects on his feet, or all these little tiny things that you could do in 5 seconds. And then you do 50 of them and you have something super, super, super cool. But yeah, This is what and this isn't really a big project because I don't have a ton of sprites. I have a ton of audio and a bunch of scripts. This is what stuff starts to look like when you get super, super complex. And I don't have a ton of objects either because I'm trying to keep it small.
So this is all really cool, and what we'll do is we'll make sure that Carson, make sure you have a controller this afternoon. So we're back, friends.
Absolutely. Yep.
We're back.
Bring a controller.
We're back this afternoon at 3:00. So you should join us then. We'll be streaming here on the Inside Participate channel and also on the NASEF channel, and that'll be exciting. We are, friends, on Inside Participate. We're 10 followers away from 50. We've only been running for a week. So if you're not following the Inside Participate Twitch channel, go follow us up. Right now, it's that little heart on the top of the screen. It helps the algorithms, which is all good. We're gaming the algorithms, friends. And everyone, thanks for watching. Thanks for chiming in on the chat. And we'll see you this afternoon, everybody.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great.
Thanks, Carson. We'll see you later.
No problem. See you later.